So we're gonna go ahead and get the planning board meeting underway. As soon as you get your computer on.
You're good.
Okay, that's fun. And I'm not seeing anybody here for privilege of the floor, so we won't have that. Which brings us directly to you, Caleb.
Wow.
All right. All right. No,
Brian
messing
Van
around.
into the fire.
That's right.
I'm
Okay.
Brad, by the way.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
Not new.
You probably know most of us. I know, Adam,
Barely.
I
and
don't
you know.
think we've
Barb.
met. I'm Barb Muth. Hi.
Nice.
We walked in together.
Okay, and then in Zoom land, we have Will Lawrence. And
Hi,
then
Caleb.
in the bottom screen is
Okay.
Michelle Brown, who
Very
is the town board liaison to the planning board. So, all right, well, great. So thank you for the various thoughts you've already sent. I think first I'll let you kick off with anything particularly you want to just say, and then we'll get into some of these points. And
Yeah, I don't know. Were you able to forward the message along that I sent earlier today?
Yeah, you sent to Bill?
I sent, you sent it to me that I did forward, that was the.
Is that like today or yesterday?
Yeah, that was this morning.
more from Caleb? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was more from Caleb, that's,
Yes,
yes, that
there it
was,
is. All right.
yes, so everyone has that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything, specific in addition to that, otherwise we'll just get in right to those points, I think, but.
Sure.
If there's anything else you wanted to say about agrivoltaics,
Well, I just came from harvesting mushrooms off from an agrivoltaic site, so yeah.
cool.
But I guess I wouldn't have a ton to say other than I go to a ton of town hall meetings all over the country where where I don't think that they have really thought through the integration of agriculture and solar enough. And then what ends up happening is you get either, like greenwashing of agrivoltaics, like where they're basically like, we're gonna do this, like pollinators or something, but then nothing really happens. They plant pollinators, but then they're not managed and maintained appropriately. They're mowed 3 times a year, so they're never blooming. So there's things, and kind of that's why I brought the attention back to the vegetation management plan, which I mentioned in there, because I think that having an appropriate vegetation management plan as part of a special use permit is a very important part of what the solar companies really should be providing. And then in addition to that, I think that more and more towns I'm seeing are gravitating towards an agrivoltaic model, and some states out and out are like saying this is what we're going to do. But I would caution with sometimes less is more, because you need the farmers to be innovative, and you don't want to you don't want to pigeonhole people into a very prescriptive model that won't work, because either their systems don't align or something like that. There needs to be a level of freedom for innovation. I think that's very important. But at the same time, solar developers by and large, it's a green industry, but they're here to make money. It is an industry, and it is a money-making industry.
So can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? Because Will and Brad and I did a tour recently of a solar facility out in Dryden. And it was what was the company? I forget the company.
Yes, sir.
Begins with an A.
Yeah, it begins with an A, Altus, maybe, Altus Solar. Anyway, and the farmer there is like very into it, and he actually works with, he's, got a lot of acreage with solar, works with 2 different companies.
Is the Carpenter Farm by chance?
Yes.
Could be, yeah, it's
Yeah,
on Ferguson
okay.
Road, yeah.
Yeah, I know
And-
them well.
yeah,
I
so-
sold them their sheep.
So
Like it, yeah.
when I asked the question, the Altus, I think it was Altus guy, who was the solar rep there, it seemed all, all very good, very, energizing, exciting, all of that. And so I asked, like, what percentage of your Altus properties or acreage or however you want to break it out are in agrivoltaics? And he said, I think he said about 40%.
It's
And
incredibly.
so the question then was, what's the limiting factor? And basically his response was that the limiting factor is the ability and willingness, I mean, particularly willingness of farmers and landowners to do this.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about your experience, obviously this is your business, and you provide that service, but in the world of solar, like how likely is it that a landowner and or farmer is going to want to do this? Because it's different,
I'm gonna pause for one second only because I'm having someone want to try to join the meeting.
Okay.
I admitted them. It looks like they're admitted, but I don't see their icon up there, so I'm trying to figure out a technical glitch here.
Well, I'll get back to that.
And so
That's a great
that gives
question.
you about 30 seconds to think of an answer,
Yep.
a very good answer to that question, but does anybody have any clue?
I think it would be good also just to state for the record what your background is. I
Oh, sorry.
was meeting you for the first time.
Yeah,
The solar agrivoltaic guy.
My bad, I've mentioned in brief at meetings, but we've never
I
had.
read that.
Yeah,
but
so, all right, so, well, Beverly Martin, perhaps you can hear us, we can't, I know your camera turned off, that's fine, use a little something there, so I apologize if something's gone wrong, but I cannot see how I've admitted you and you should be here, so, all right. So anyway, yes, give us a background on who you are.
Yes, all right, so Caleb Scott, United Agrivoltaics, Caroline resident. We have a company that is a farm partner group, so it's similar to a co-op. We operate all over the United States, from Hawaii to Maine and Minnesota to Texas. We've got 143 sites right now with about 39,000 sheep in our portfolio, but we're not like United Sheep Grazers of America or United Agrivoltaics. So we actually look very holistically at each of these projects and farm them appropriately. So sometimes it's pasture poultry for fire breaks, with chicken tractors kind of running, sometimes autonomously, sometimes manually. We're doing other sorts of value add products in addition to sheep on some acreage. Like what I was saying earlier, today I was just harvesting like insane amounts of mushrooms. So yeah, 12 years in the industry of actually farming solar. And we have hundreds of farmers within our farm partner group. And I was the founding member and vice president of the American Solar Grazing Association, which has about 1,800 members now. And I also started a nonprofit called the the United Agrivoltaics Heartland Alliance, which primarily is focused in the Midwest, kind of the corn belt, so to speak. And yeah, so
Yeah, so now the Barb's question.
yeah. So to your question, I think that the fact that the carpenters are operating on their own farm is unique in the industry.
Because typically it's not, it's probably like you're coming in to do the vegetation management.
We have farmers that are very anxious to get access to tax-free land that they did not have to buy. And provide their sheep as a service. The carpenters having the agricultural background that they do and being willing to do it is a bit of an anomaly. That is not the normal.
Yeah.
So finding farmers that are willing to participate and go, yeah, I'm near the grid, high voltage is next door to my place, and I would also like to do this is rare. Most of the people are like, I wish it could be in my backyard, but it's not. We travel. I'm in 5 counties with my own sheep personally. And yes, I am in Tompkins County, but not in Caroline. So like we're in Hartford, we're in Candor, we're in Big Flats, we're in like 4 sites in Watkins Glen. We're in Lansing. We are not in here, in this area. So we go where the projects are.
Sure.
But then we're also, there's a lot of other farmers in the area within our network that are interested in grazing, and they are Caroline residents. So there's plenty of Caroline residents that would love an opportunity for grazing on land.
A ton of Caroline land.
Correct,
Yeah.
and or anywhere.
Okay.
So like they're willing to also ship their sheep out.
Yeah.
So so the opportunity is huge for the farming community. But it is unique in that like most farmers are like, well, I got the lease on the land, I'm moving to Florida because I'm at retirement age.
Right.
That's the average kind of situation that we see nationwide. Yeah. So I would say this, so for them, the limiting factor should not, they should reach out to somebody who's willing to find a partner for them at their other, 60% of their sites. They would be one of the few companies in the country that are at 40%. Only 1% of all of solar in the United States is being dual used right now. 1%. So it's a buzzword, but it is not actually in practice.
Okay.
Which is a core issue that we're sort of facing and looking at, and that, we understand, because you said, it's a business to try to make money. So from their perspective, getting as much solar on the property is the most important thing, because that's where they get their money from. But either from a town's perspective, or if it's a farmer who wants to continue farming, there's a different calculus that goes on. So to what extent does the town try to mandate that there be agrivoltaic development, as opposed to simply say, gee, we'd like it, and if you do it, here are a few guidelines.
Yeah. And I think that like, here's the thing, if we can be competitive with the lawnmowers, why not? The problem is these companies oftentimes don't want to break their traditions. So they have people that are used to dealing with lawnmowers, that are used to dealing with companies. They don't have to change their master service agreements. They don't have to have legal go through and figure out how do we deal with people on our property that may or may not be understanding how to work on a power plant with proper protective equipment and all this other stuff. So they tend to shy away from this as a default until someone says, show us the plan that has this. So for like in Illinois, for example, they have like an IDNR and an ABP, which is like there are programs there that say, sure, anybody can put solar anywhere, but there's a lottery. And if you check these boxes, you're going to get thrown to the top of the list. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, everybody in the state is doing agrivoltaics. Because everybody wants the people that aren't just get booted out of the state. They're just not. But here's the thing. Then the state has the ability to go, oh, well, now we can look at these plans and go, which ones seem more viable?
Right.
Which ones are incorporating pollinators and agriculture? And how does that look? And sometimes it's a bit of a dumpster fire, right? Because everyone's just like, I'm going to throw everything in there. And then it doesn't work because they're like milkweed and all this stuff that the sheep aren't going to eat. That might be toxic or poisonous. Stuff's too tall. They don't make their panels high enough. There's a lot of other things that can happen as a result of that. But that just comes down to like a well-planned vegetation management plan. So if as a town you say, show me your vegetation management plan, we really want to see this, and there needs to be an alternative to mechanical mowing. That's the most important thing, because the next alternative to mechanical mowing, it's not overly prescriptive, but they have to at least think about it. And when they think about it, they have to at least say, well, it's a less expensive option.
So it's interesting hearing you talk, because, if one thinks, oh, pollinators are good, milkweed is good, but you've just given that as a great example of why it might not be good. So my question is, in your experience for towns, communities that have done this, what level of expertise then in terms of vegetation management and vegetation types is required for the review board or whatever board it is that's reviewing and approving or accepting the vegetation management plan.
So I think part of this comes down, yeah, that's a great question, because we have certain municipalities where they're like, I have an agronomist on staff. Awesome.
Yeah, we don't.
Not everybody has that, right? That luxury. So
Some volunteers with a little bit knowledge of ecology, and that's
That's
about
right.
it.
So that's where you would want to say like, hey, we want a forage blend that is suitable for livestock, low growing, easy to maintain underneath the panels. And in areas that are not farmed outside the array, that are within the leased area, we want pollinators. And I mean, you can put all the milkweed in one area, and that's better for the monarchs than to have a milkweed plant every
Right.
150 yards.
Mm.
So if you just take a
Yeah.
corner of the site that's a weird corner that you're not gonna farm
Yeah.
and plant milkweed in that, great. But it has to be intentional. These plans, it's very easy. It's very easy for these companies, and again, I'm not trashing on them because I think a lot of them do have good intentions in some respects, but the reality also is a very fast growing industry, and a lot of these kids are just out of college. I mean, they don't have a ton of real world experience. It is. I mean, I'm like, just you see it across the board. You're like, oh, I feel pretty young, and I'm the oldest one in the room. Like, you know, so I would say this, like, it's okay to ask for things, but the more prescriptive you get, the more burdensome it becomes on you, and also the more the more unsure developers become. You know, so but there are a lot of developers out there that will bait and switch. They'll put a plan together, they'll put it in, they'll go, well, we couldn't find a sheep farmer, and then there's just the business as usual. So having that vegetation management plan ensures that they have pre-thought it out and that they've at least solicited, you know, some sort of bids from someone local, and or if they're not local, someone that would be willing to come in and actually perform this work. Because it really is disheartening to see them pay like sometimes 30% more for something, and they're just like, they're ratepayers. I don't care. It doesn't make that's not my part of the project. I'm done and on to the next project. You know, like everybody is so isolated. It's a black hole in a lot of these companies. So what happens is, you know, the guy that has the best intentions goes, okay, I'm done with my part, I'm out. And then the next guy goes, I just know a bunch of landscapers, and I've got a good thing going with that landscaper guy in Syracuse, and he'll come down here and mow it with his, you know, H2A workers for, you know, this price. Well, that doesn't really help Caroline, right? That's not really the, you know, and the other thing is, it's not like they can't afford it. They just need to finance it in and budget it. And if you ask for it up front, they do. It's in the budget. It's already there. It's financed out over 30 years. You know, I'm not saying drop a well in, or because if you do that, then it's like, well, this site can't get water because of this or that reason. So it's a no-go. Well, then that would be crazy, because I would rather just truck water in. It's like, you know, like for me, I don't care if there's a well there. It's easy enough for me to bring water to the site. So I would rather have my sheep on that grass personally. So I think, you know, and there are states like Maine or Massachusetts that like, oh, we're the best. And it's like, no, you have 6 projects in your entire state, and I have 47 in New York State under my business, because there's no limiting factors. We're the cheaper option, so we're the option people go for. But like over there, they're like, oh, it can't be agrivoltaic unless you put your panels 10 feet off the ground and space them 24 feet apart and do all this. My sheep love the shade. Put your panels closer together. Pack as much energy as you can per square meter. And guess what? That grass grows in the shade. Everybody knows grass grows underneath the trees in their yard. It's not like you're not going to get that grass growing. So it's, and our stocking densities are higher. There's so many amazing, reasons why we like the shade. It's protection for our animals and everything else. So I would say, I would say just as a general rule, try not to get overly prescriptive with like certain things.
And Elliot, we did discuss that, and we're on board with you on
Yeah.
that, so the sales on that point, because, but this actually brings to the point that prescribing what might be good for sheep is one thing.
That's right.
Part of the issue is that there's different forms of agrivoltaics,
Yep.
and if you want to be growing crops, it's a different set of parameters, and so it seems like the intended project, I mean, both the solar project, but the farming project have to come together. I think that's one of the things you're saying, is that so,
I'd agree.
so first question for you is detail. Something you're saying that grazing is cost competitive with mowing for vegetation management, just trying to keep things down. Is that correct?
It is, and it's also a higher value than corn and any other row cropping. So say for example, you have an acre of corn and you have an acre of soy. Sheep are between 3 and 10 times more money per acre for the farmer.
And the money you're getting out both in wool and meat, or
Just mainly for meat.
mainly for meat? Okay.
Yeah. So there is a wool market, but the wool market is small in the United States at this time. Solar will change that eventually.
So now let's take sheep, set them aside.
Yep.
For Caroline, what other forms of agricultural endeavors do you see being reasonable to do in Caroline besides grazing?
Well, here's a perfect example. I am a big proponent that a farmer that has the ability will be innovative and make the most amount of money possible with what they have. So there's already a lot of money that the company can make from the solar. We can farm anything. Just give us the green light, so to speak. I just did a project in Candor, New York, at the bus garage, where we did a test and we put 300 mushroom logs underneath less than 300 feet of panels. I'm talking about 300 feet of panels. That is probably going to return about $15,000. Imagine if I put all 5 acres in mushrooms. You're talking about $1 million mushroom operation.
Well, until the price collapse, but
Well, sure. But what I'm saying is, this is farmsteading here. We're not trying, are there 1,000-acre projects that are looking at Caroline at this time? Probably not. We don't have the infrastructure for them. But with smaller DG, community scale projects, there are. And look, I think anything that is done within the leased area is farming. So look, I'll put my sheep on the inside, but maybe I'll grow garlic between the road and the fence line. Well, guess what? I have a hard time growing garlic in a 3-acre plot, which you could grow $20,000 worth of garlic in a 3-acre plot. I have a hard time doing that when it's mandated that there's 15 or 20-foot pine trees.
Can I just say something here?
Go ahead, Will.
Okay, what you're saying about small lots, I think bears on another issue you brought up. And it may seem indirect at first, but one of the comments you made was about the lack of infrastructure. You said it'd be great if there was money to bring the lines down from Route 79. And that is a major consideration from the developer side. I don't know if people picked up on the fact that the guy out at Carpenter's farm said that the sites they pick a lot of times come off of the VDR stack. And what he was saying was they look for sites that have the capacity.
Yep.
And that is something that Caroline lacks because we lack load to begin with.
Correct.
So we're actually in a better position to do smaller projects.
We're not in a position to do any projects in Caroline.
Well, okay,
If I wanted
I
to
can
do
go
a
with that.
5 acre solar project on Level Green Road right now, I would not be able to do it until we get 3 phase. If on this
Okay.
south facing slope here behind the town hall, on the Crispell's land, at some point they thought, hey, this is fallow land, it's not even being done, it's just being bush hogged. There's nothing being done with it. Nothing could be done. There's not, the nearest 3 phase, I believe, is way down there by the livery. It's at the Phantom factory.
Yep.
We would need to get 3 phase all the way through here to even consider any solar project in Caroline. The only reason that it's in Berkshire is because the cross line comes through there. But even that is so limited because of all the other big wooded land. Nobody's gonna go in and deforest that. So there's not there, that is the only area in
Right,
our.
and to Will's point, those aren't, even if we got a grant, would the lines even be built, as you say, because we have to impact forest, but also there's no regular load here.
Yeah.
They'd be sitting there for years until maybe a project can forward. So
Yeah.
is that possible? Has that happened anywhere? Is that a?
So-
Not part of this law, but it's a question about policy for the town board.
Yeah, so the idea of solar in Caroline is theoretical until the infrastructure is built. It isn't gonna happen here, it just isn't gonna happen. It's all over Dryden, but look at those big old power lines coming right through the carpenter's land, literally splitting his property right down straight through. And man, if we could have that, that would be awesome. That would be great, but we just don't. And
Developers don't ever invest and pay for.
you're talking
Well,
about-
developers do.
They do, but
That's how it works. right
yeah,
now.
it's, you're talking,
But it makes Caroline less attractive.
they've got to use up all the land that's easy to access first.
That's what Will was saying, right? She said
Yeah.
they take it off the stack where they know they've got
Right,
capacity.
and he was saying that a lot of their solar farms are going up closer to town, closer to
Yep.
Lansing and Ithaca than out here in the boondocks, even though we got better farmland perhaps,
Correct.
or space
Yeah.
that could be used, it's just not close to the infrastructure.
And the land we have here is probably better for grazing anyway, just because of the soil type, than it is for traditional row cropping and stuff. We're not in like, I mean, there are prime soils, but they're limited to like, right here in the valley. But I would say also that's not necessarily a bad thing. To be at the end of the line means that the companies get more efficient, you get better products, you get better projects. I'm working on projects that were 15 years old, built in New York, because New York was early to adopt a lot of things. Those projects are still operating, they're still very functional, maybe only 2% loss over 15 years of the whole thing, but they're challenging. They have a low lead edge, they have rear forward posts, the racking systems are poorly designed for management, but that's also why they call me, right? They're also oftentimes built on swampy soil and in areas that were less prime, and it makes it more challenging for me. Because now if I have to go in and mow something the sheep aren't eating, I have to do it in a time where I'm not gonna get stuck, right? But as things progress, right, those same companies go, okay, now we're building in the next state over. Now we're building, and you go to some of the projects that are being built now by these companies, and they're light years ahead. They have 600-watt panels instead of 250 watts each panel. So this is like 3 or 4 times the efficiency out of an acre. They're single post that you can just easily mow around. They're oftentimes systems that track the sun, which are much more efficient and easier to mow because you can put them in what's called maintenance mode and just mow underneath them. You don't have to lead edge. So there's things now that are. And I can only imagine when we get the utility lines, and we're gonna have to get them. I mean, if just based on population growth. I mean, there's gonna come a time where just like we, as a town, we cannot sustain just two-phase forever. So when we do get them, we will be the prime spot for this. And when we are the prime spot, we want to make sure that there is in our town the right ordinances in place that ensure we've thought these things through. And and that the projects, and I do think also more and more companies are kind of gravitating towards this dual use thing. And probably New York State may mandate something at some point. Already they're doing like a sin tax. Like if you take prime ag land, you're getting less financing rates and less everything else. So they're already doing it to a degree on a state level. So, but what can we do on a town level? That's gonna be making the site specific stuff in regards to the special use permits
Okay, so
specifically.
we're gonna circle back to that in a second, back to the question of, so we have mushrooms and we have sheep. What else works in parallel?
Well, garlic could work in that. Again, I'm gonna say anything you can farm that's a high value crop in the perimeter, in the buffer zones, which are the zone, that 50
Right,
foot.
but so you're talking about that either on the outside of the panel.
Correct.
Between the panels, you're still suggesting grazing is the best option.
Well, or poultry,
Mhm.
or pigs. We do pasture pigs, we do poultry. And we
Now,
do,
those don't do vegetation management for you though.
of course,
So, I mean.
the chickens just eat the grass.
They
Yeah.
do, okay.
Pigs do.
And pigs will
Yeah,
grass.
our pigs just eat the grass. We do
Okay.
not feed them anything.
So that
And
maintains,
they
there's
just
not
eat the
a problem
grass.
with pigs digging in, I don't know.
Not if you get the right type of pig.
Ah, okay.
But again, you don't wanna be like, we're gonna make this you gotta use Cooney
No,
pig
we
or
would
Idaho
not
pasture
do
pig.
that.
Because it gets, right,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, you let I use pigs because it's a value add. If I put one pig to every 10 sheep and sheep farrows out on site,
Yeah.
that means I'm gonna have 6 to 8 piglets,
Yeah.
and every one of those piglets is worth $200. For that one pig,
Yeah.
I literally just got $1,200.
Right.
And that pig eats, she's more efficient. For every bite she takes of grass, it's 3 times more efficient than a sheep. So the conversion ratio to forage is 3 times greater.
Right.
So then she's literally like, but I couldn't put 70 pigs on a solar site. It would just be a mess, right? You need to, that's where the multi-species grazing comes in. That's where the chicken tractors come in. We run the chicken tractors usually on the exterior perimeter. We can put about 200 chicken tractors in a 12-foot by 24-foot.
explain chicken tractor to me.
Okay, so a chicken tractor is a hoop that has wheels on it and a little thing on the front that you just pull. And then there's an auger and a hopper, and I can put some augmented feed and minerals and a water thing. And we have water things sticking down, and then they get their water, and then just every day you move it. And they
Okay,
eat,
so they hang out underneath the thing, you move it, they hang out.
yep, they eat the grass.
Replace the coop too.
Yeah, they eat the grass, they're protected from hawks and everything, and then, but behind them is like wonderfully fertilized,
Yeah, it's nice.
super carbon sequestrated soil, and then we just put some clover on, and then in 10 weeks, when we come all the way back around to that first spot, those chickens are ready for market, and we're ready for another batch. And we can run 2 in tandem like this, because most of the time, there's between 18 and 24 feet between the edge of the panel and the fence line.
So the reason I'm hammering on this is for what, if anything, to have in a law, this is specific about, you mentioned the 36-inch for the leading edge, for example. Or we don't have numbers, but like, should there be a certain minimum clearance? We talked about this between the panels and a fence line. And to what extent that is driven by the species and whatever's happening there. So are there any general things that are reasonable to say that aren't too discouraging for someone who is either not
Yeah.
gonna do it that way or have a different species? So.
Yeah, so I would say this, again, most folks will put an appropriate, what we call headland. So you can get a tractor around, turn it around and go down the next lane. But there are times when there's a wetland area or something where they have to make the fence closer. And if they don't make the fence closer, they have to shift all their panels in and or lose production. And then the project's not tenable anymore. So we don't wanna be like, but in that project, I just wouldn't put a chicken tractor there. I might move it I might move a single chicken tractor around the laydown yard or the area where it's required for like fire trucks to turn around. Because there's usually a big open area that's a staging area within the array. Sometimes it's around the inverter, sometimes it's, just inside the gate. But it's required that a fire truck be able to turn around, and maybe we just go a smaller option, So that's what I'm saying. The farmer will be, but you gotta have it in there almost like a right to farm.
Mhm.
And then let the farmer decide, does he want to do mint? Does he want to do lavender? Because those things are high value things that can be made into essential oils. And you know what? Sheep don't bother them. They could be planted in a row. But you don't want to be like, you have to do mint,
No, exactly.
but
So-
you want the farmer to be able to if they
Right.
want to.
And so the question is sort of setting some minimum standards that enables that, because, the pounds are there for 30, 40, 50 years, depending, maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
Whereas the farming style might, well, for a few years, we're gonna do mint, and no, this farmer retired, don't do mint anymore, I'm gonna do something else, and you don't wanna preclude the something else, but you don't wanna make it so inefficient for the photovoltaic person, they don't come in, so.
And
that's-
here's the other thing, I say, yeah, I'm gonna do mint, and I plow in a bunch of mint, and then I go, yeah, it didn't work, and I don't wanna do this anymore. Now the solar company is stuck with a bunch of mint on their site, which is going hog wild.
Yeah, mint grows well.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the heck do we do with this? You know what I mean? The next guy doesn't wanna deal with it. So like there's a relationship with the developer that has to be also with the vegetation management specialist. That's important, because if I say, look, I wanna do mint, they're gonna go, whoa, 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 whoa. And I say, hey, listen, here's a little thing. And it says, if I do it, I'm gonna turn it back into whatever it was before. That's part of my contract. And you don't even have to pay me until I do that. Because again, we are getting paid for this service. I'm not just going in there and putting my sheep in for free.
How often is honey, one of the products of agrivoltaics?
Well, initially it was one of the big pushers, but then people realized again that it was like greenwashed. People were like, I put a hive up with one super and one hive body on 50 acres. And people are like, did you get like 100 pounds of honey, like 50 pounds of honey? That's where's the economic value to that for farming? So I think the ability to allow it, because it is a fenced in area, so bears and stuff aren't going to be getting into it.
Mhm.
It is oftentimes in an area where there are more fallow lands, and it's really good and or specifically planted spaces for pollinators.
Mhm.
So when we do put honey on site, and I work with like Hungry Bear and a few other bigger honey producers in New York to put honey on solar,
Mhm.
we usually get paid for that, but it's a feel good sort of thing. It's like, we're gonna give you $450. It's kind of a PR bite. It's not
Yeah.
a real.
It's one
They're-
thing,
they're- it's to
the
justify their
pollinate
time.
crops, that's one thing, it's a real
Right.
value to the.
Exactly.
Whereas the other is just like.
Because
feel
they're
good.
like, why the heck would I put a hive there
Yeah.
when I could go get paid to do it at the apple orchard?
Right.
Even though the apple orchard is right across the street, I'm only just benefiting the apple orchard.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? So what we do is we say, look, it's $450 for a setup fee. And then, maybe $120 a year for a maintenance fee.
Mhm.
And that's enough to buy a new queen cell if you need to, sometimes not. But like, it's the idea that we're valuing it, but we're not like, it's not the primary agricultural industry,
Mhm. Okay.
Good industry, important industry,
Right.
but not, there should be some sort of revenue attached to that, a monetary product that's being produced that's
Yeah.
value. Now, there are some,
Question I think we had at one point was, should we attach a requirement that so much value per acre is agriculturally produced? So it's not just,
You can't put one hive on
they
the
did
G, I
one
imagine.
hive on there and you're getting $450
So-
now.
so-
Wrote that question down, you read my.
so that's a great question, and I do think that there's merit to it. However, think about it like this: what if someone puts dry ewes on a site and rotationally grazes them in. Now, those ewes are very valuable. They're gonna get bred and they're gonna have lambs, and the lambs are gonna be born on site over here, like in their barn over the winter. What monetary value was attached to that? It would be hard to say we made X amount of dollars off from those dry ewes. What you could do is value the forage as a crop and say, look, if this were hay, it would be producing X amount of value of hay, and X amount of pounds of sheep were sustained over X amount of times. I do this in Indiana. Trust me, you don't want to go that route. It's a pain in the neck.
Well, could we just do something like what New York State already does, and Tompkins County is just have some sort of lease language. So just want to say other farmer leases my farmland, I then don't have to meet the requirements for being a farmer.
So
the
you could say yes.
The farmer has to meet requirement, even though he doesn't make, let's say, $10,000 per year, whatever the
Yeah.
minimum requirement is, off of my lease. Let's say I rented out 10 acres, we'll just say. He's not making 10,000 from my 10 acres. He's making it from his whole operation. Agriculturally, could we or should we do something similar with agrivoltaics and say that, well, the management can only be done by a legit farmer who
Yeah.
is making the.
So I've definitely seen that written into ordinances where folks say you need to have a contract with a farmer. It doesn't have to be a local farmer. Obviously, there's preference on that, and for all parties, they will generally try to find a local farmer. The where that gets a little bit where that can get a little bit sticky is in the maintenance and monitoring aspect of that. Because what happens, they have certain standards that need to be met on the site for both insurance and for their own power usage, right? So if they have a contract with a farmer and the farmer's like, yeah, I'll do it, and then they put out 5 sheep, and then it needs to be mowed, and they fire that farmer, they should not have to be like, you shouldn't go, well, where's your contract? It's like, look, these guys aren't performing. And then the other thing is it becomes burdensome on a town to manage and monitor all this stuff. Like every year that they renew their contracts, are they supposed to submit them to the town for review? I mean,
it's just like the tax man. You have to submit your renewal that you have leased land every single year.
Yeah.
And it's just a testimony that you're testifying vis-a-vis your signature that you are in fact doing this.
it's not a bad idea. I'm just saying, like, it just comes with
potential issues.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, but then what's the alternative if you're not having something like a tax man?
well, if it's built, if the requirement is built into the special use permit and they are not adhering to the vegetation management standards set forth within the special use permit, you as a town can say, shut your power off. You're no longer in compliance. That special use permit dictates everything. It dictates everything that they do. And if their vegetation management plan, and this is why I was saying, get that vegetation management plan in the special use permit, because that's gonna do by default what you're saying. And if someone's like, look, I don't see sheep there, there's no sheep there, and you go, show us your contract, you're supposed to have this alternative to vegetation management, show us where that is, and then, or mechanical mowing, and they can't do that. It's within your right to just be like, okay, you need to decommission your project. And trust me, they will very, very quickly do that, but it doesn't come with all of the, nuancy regulations.
Have you seen that in towns in New York?
Where they've
Where the
required
threat,
it?
where the threat of, okay, you aren't doing, you're in the bargain, we're gonna yank your.
Yeah, they do it all the time. And I mean, I'm on a project right now where my sheep weren't able to graze for 2 years because they could prove that the pollinators that they planted in the fall that were supposed to be germinating over the spring were there. And then somebody went in and said, I don't see them. And they're like, well, they're gonna be there in the fall. And they're like, we're not allowing you to turn your power on until we see these pollinators on site. And I'm thinking to myself, like, geez, I wish my sheep could eat those things, you know? But like that company lost out on maybe millions of dollars because the town was really putting their foot down on saying, you said you were gonna do this and I want the proof. So yeah, it happens all the time. It happens with like the little things too. You would be surprised, like where they say, oh, we're gonna put in 8-foot tall screening trees, and they put in 6-foot tall screening trees, and they go, well, guess what? You gotta wait 2 years until they're 8 feet tall. And you're not even getting and they're ripping those screening trees out and putting in new screening trees. And I'm like, what good is that for the environment? Like, what is good is that for anybody? But like, the point is, like, it does happen. Yes, I see it.
That was a new question.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Will.
What kind of farming might someone do that would also be detrimental to the area? You know, if you leave things wide open, what are the things you still would want to restrict?
If you were to use the site as a feedlot, you would have nitrogen loading and runoff and other issues. I can't imagine that as a scenario, but that is probably the only thing that I would see that would be detrimental to the area, considering we like our water and we like but if you were to be like, hey, it's 25 acres, I'm gonna put 500 cows in there and feed them a bunch of grain, like, one, that's kind of counter to everything anybody on both parties would be really trying to do, but it is possible. I mean, a feedlot with shade does sound alluring, and you know, if it was built on an old parking lot and it could be scraped down and there could be, you know, mitigation measures to keep the nitrogen loading out of like 6 Mile Creek or something, I don't know, but that would probably be the only thing I could think of that would be detrimental. Even the amount of farming that like as a high, like, you know, high usage in like fertilizers and high usage in, you know, maybe herbicides or pesticides is probably super minimal, and it's stuff that's going to be happening on a farm anyway, and probably not going to be appropriate for, you know, for a solar facility. So
yeah, I understand some of the pesticides, et cetera, would be damaging to the panels, is my, you know, understanding, right?
Sure,
They
yeah.
don't like high pesticide use, probably.
correct. Yeah.
All right. I have a couple more
Would
questions, but the other guys, yeah, go ahead, Will, and anybody else who wants to jump in first.
Would
Will
the
first, and then-
developer be aware that they don't want the pesticides there? Like,
Yeah, that's in what we have is called a master service agreement. So the developer has with the provider of the vegetation management, they have what's called a master service agreement. And that's the agreement between us that says these are appropriate and these are not appropriate uses of the land. These are the requirements for insurance. These are the requirements for our insurances. Maybe it's like 8 inches or whatever. And that would really be the thing so again, that's not something that you guys would probably need to worry about. And I can't imagine a developer wanting, you know, that. Yep.
So a question about screen plantings. So our current law says it's very, very brief, at least in this section. Screen plantings, native species are preferred. A mix of deciduous and evergreen varieties is preferred, implying trees. And one of the things that I was really struck by our tour of that other property was, you know, the suggestion that that instead of trees, there be something that has more ecological value,
Yes.
like pollinators, or, you know, you mentioned maybe garlic field or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm just curious, in your experience working with towns, how common is it to see something like this, which requires
Well-
trees as screening versus, making it more,
I saw that and chuckled a little bit because I'm like, they're just gonna put like 5 trees in and place them like 100 feet apart.
right,
That is not
Right.
enough if it's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think what's more important are good neighbor, like in good faith, they like good neighbor relations. So developers will often go to a neighbor and be like, oh, you're gonna have to look at this. I'm gonna give you $2,500 a year to pay your taxes. So it doesn't matter what your property taxes go up or down. We're gonna cover your tax base.
Mhm,
That's a good neighbor payment.
mhm,
It's cheaper for them to do that every year for the next 30 years than put $100,000 worth of trees in. And guess what? The neighbor's happier.
Hmm.
Because we need to, as a society, just see solar sites as we do telephone lines.
Yeah.
Our great grandparents probably would roll over in their grave if they saw telephone wires everywhere, and people were literally cutting down telegraph poles because they didn't want to see them. Like like it just needs to become part of the landscape. And you know what? They're not that bad. But if you're living next to one and you're worried about your house, like value, that's valid.
mhm.
The solar company, if they're not like being completely like bombasted into a box, will work with that neighbor.
Mhm.
They're not trying, they want happy neighbors.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, you saw that on a prime example. Guess what he's doing out there? He's putting his cows out there and they're eating the crap out of those trees.
Right, I know, I
They're
saw
just
that.
eating them up.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? It's
Right.
not like they're
Right.
screening anything,
Right.
and they put them every like 8 feet.
Right,
It's just a complete,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's a waste of resources.
yeah,
It's a waste of land use.
yeah,
Unless, and again, this is a big unless, it is in, I have seen in highly residential areas or something where they want to get very prescriptive because there's a housing complex or something,
Mhm.
an HOA that they're like, it's not an individual, it's like a bunch of
Mhm.
people. And usually in that case, you build a hedgerow. You build something that's going to be native and natural. You put amalanth gears and stuff that's good for the deer and turkeys and
Mhm.
things and you just let it go.
Mhm.
You're not trying to prune a bunch of arborvitaes that aren't even native.
Right.
They just provide nothing, and they're this skinny.
Yeah.
You know, so I think anything to do with screening. Also, it would be better to just say, put a shadow fence up. Like, if you're really that concerned, like on this 100 acre or 100 feet where this person's gonna have a view shed, along the roadways and in most of these areas, it's just a non-issue for farming. Look, people think of solar sites and they're like, I want beauty. Well, guess what? You don't pay for that view. You don't pay their taxes.
Mhm.
And it's like, find the beauty in the dual use.
Mhm.
Find the beauty in maximizing the value of this land, the calories per square meter that are produced, and find the beauty somewhere else.
Mhm.
Don't the visual aesthetics are like, look, silage bunkers aren't beautiful. Silos with shiny domes aren't beautiful. A lot with a bunch of, half broke down hay wagons is not beautiful. Farming isn't always beautiful. People just have gotten used to looking past that stuff. Right there, same property, right on Route 13, there is an insanely huge equipment yard of broken down equipment. And everybody just drives by it and nobody looks at it. Nobody's like, that tractor's been there for 30 years. And so is that one. And so is that one. And oh my gosh, Teets and Sons or the scrap metal place would be going crazy right now for all this stuff. Nobody says that. They go, it's farming.
So I tend to agree with you. The one thing that's been brought up, and I don't know to what extent people are exaggerating the issue, is I'm driving, there's glare off the panels, that's a problem.
So this is where, and you guys have it in there, the no glare, almost every panel, especially panels built in the United States, and they most have to be built in the United States with the new laws federally, but they're all glare resistant. So you're talking about, it's less glare than a pond. It's not even, the glare is not a thing like it was 10 years ago.
And I think the intent behind that screening was a natural hedgerow sort of thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if the animals are gonna eat it all the time, I mean, I know we can't grow anything in our yard that doesn't have a fence around it.
That's right.
Right.
Because the deer pressure,
Mhm.
but, so.
So, and even when you do plant the things that the deer won't eat, it's like, man, let's all just sit around and wait 20 years while we look at the site that, and by the time it's grown up, I could have planted 20 years worth of corn down that row or anything else. You know, like I have used buffer zones for corn, and then we just keep 6 rows along the fence, and we let the deer and turkeys eat it, and we get paid to leave 6 rows there all winter long. But guess what? Nobody can even find the solar sites. They're like, we're driving around looking for the solar site. We don't even know where it is. We had in one of our projects in Indiana, we literally had people writing op-eds like against the project that couldn't find it because it was behind, 70 some rows of corn that was all Orvin Redelbacher popcorn. And then we left 6 rows, and guess what? All of the pheasants, bobwhite quail, turkeys, and deer were frequenting that area. We even set up a camera on that and went, look at how good this is for the wildlife. And guess what? Nobody even sees that. So there's ways you can do it with agriculture that are probably superior than maybe than maybe pine trees.
Another question from? Okay, a couple key questions. So you, in what you wrote this morning, you say, I think all projects over 1 megawatt should da. Okay, so that sounds like you would be in favor of a requirement on any project that's large enough, and you
Yeah.
chose 1 megawatt.
Which is 6 acres.
Okay, I was trying to remember my numbers,
Yeah.
and that fits pretty close to our large versus medium scale. I'll have to
It'd
go
be like
look
the
at that.
large, yeah.
Yeah, and then that fits with the sort of philosophy with we try to make lighter requirements on the middle size and heavier on the bigger. So I don't have any problem with particular things you suggested, but I just wanted to clarify that, in that sense, that would apply to all projects of that size, not independent of whether they're on prime land, non-prime land, whatever.
Like New York State, I think missed the bar a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, when they did the prime ag land. And that is because agrivoltaics inherently works better on prime ag land. And they're discounting that. So they're doing like a sin tax for prime ag land, but I'm like, please build me a project on prime ag land. My lambs get fatter on prime ag land. I have more nutritious food. It's better soil. It's better everything. And that's the land we really want to protect, because if it doesn't go into solar, it's probably going into housing. And
So this is my following question is, so would you be in favor, would you suggest that that any solar development on prime ag land be required to be, I don't know, we're gonna call it agrivoltaic friendly, because we have to come up with a set of standards, but not necessarily be an agrivoltaic project, but be amenable to becoming an agrivoltaic project at some point?
yes, and I would say making it mandatory in the special use permit to submit a alternative to mechanical mowing.
Yes, I.
So that would be important, because it's not saying you have to do this, but they have to have it in their special use permit. And if they don't have an alternative to mechanical mowing, and they do, there has to be something in the special use permit that allows for it to integrate into agriculture in time. And 95%, like I said, we're on 142 projects. 95% of them right now were built with no agricultural integration in mind. They were built and they were supposed to be mowed, and now we're raising them because we're the better alternative. Not always cheaper, but better. So in some cases we're more expensive, but they have opted for our service because it outperforms the mowing,
So it seems to me that most of the fight or problems come around doing not grazing, but cropping. And that, at that workshop that you were at, that was all the research that Cornell's doing, whatever is, what makes it crops, and that's where I think it gets much more complicated. You have to have the tractor.
But that's where you create almost like a right to farm act within the special use permit. You go, look, we don't want you to be, and if I guess the verbiage behind this is tricky. And I don't know of any towns that have had like a right to farm on solar bill. It'd be very interesting to see what that looked like, you know, but I think that it would have to be something along the lines of like, if it doesn't impede the electrical production and it's consistent with vegetation management, then the ability to farm should not be should not be taken away. Like you should not be able to tell somebody, no, you can't put a chicken tractor on if it doesn't block their panels and it is also eating their vegetation, right? Like and again, that is not something I've actually ever seen before. It would be super cool if we put that in there, but I don't know, like, you wouldn't want somebody to be like, well, then I'm just gonna like put a bunch of corn and up down the row and then it's gonna shade everything and they're gonna lose electrical production. Like, obviously that wouldn't work. It has to be that there has to be a component that's in vegetation management. It has to meet.
Or some negotiation between the two parties.
That's right. But you know, there's this whole new thing now, and I would talk about this briefly, is ecovoltaics. And I think that's where the honey and pollinators goes in, but it's a new term. And it's like, hey, if we have these big, larger parcels, let's divide it up so that there's a wildlife corridor, so the deer don't have to go out and in the road and around, like they can get in between the sites. Let's put bird boxes up around the project, so that or make more native habitat for ground nesting birds. I know you guys mentioned like some things in there with birds, and one of the initiatives we do in our company is we actually release these types of birds. And but I have seen more harrier hawks, more kestrels, and more hawks and more owls on these solar sites than anywhere else. Why? Because there's no foxes and cats to compete with. They're fenced in. And once these birds realize that, they're like, that's my favorite place to hang out.
Well, they got a lot of good perches and hopefully a lot of short grass to see the shrews and.
That's exactly right. And also, like bobwhite quails and things like that are now finding these spaces as natural habitats where they would be almost like old silvopasturing, where we used to, before we did open acreage pasturing, it was like half in the woods, there was shrub brush, nobody really cared so much. But that's the sort of environment that these animals like. So the quail love to duck in and out of these panels. They like to have the protection, you know, that it affords them, the visual protection from the sky. And also when it's being grazed and not mechanically mown, their nests aren't just being destroyed. So we're seeing a lot more agriculture on these sites, but also like bat boxes, pollinator boxes. You know, these are things where you can be like, it's low hanging fruit. It's not even a rounding error to ask for a bat box, you know, at your inverter. What does it cost them? A couple $100 to get it installed. But like, it's the intentionality behind it that's more important. And you'd like to think that they will do this on their own, but it's a utility and they're a power plant. So it's not going to happen unless it's requested by the town.
All right, lots of questions to think and talk about, but last question from me is any thoughts you have, and this came up at the conference, but I don't know if you have any further info on the impact on ag exemptions of developing photovoltaics on a farmland. Where is New York State on this? Do you have?
So at least at the farm presentation is once it goes into photovoltaics, it's no ag exemption.
Correct.
But the makeup is the power company pays your taxes.
Yeah. Well,
so you're not getting an exemption, you're just not paying any taxes.
So the
farmer doesn't, but here's the catch to this. So there are what's called a power purchase agreement, and I mentioned that briefly. And that's where the companies are like buying they're selling large tracts of stuff to like communities or whatever. But as a town, you have what you can ask for, a pilot program, which is a payment in lieu of taxes. So you basically say, look, agriculturally, we were getting taxed what, $13 per thousand, and it's capped at like, let's say it's capped at 1,500 per agricultural acre. So it's like $27 per acre for the year. for the agricultural land. Let's just use that as an example. It's probably not exactly accurate, but if it goes out of agricultural use, then it's taxed at $57 per thousand. And the acreage is now worth $5,000 because it's developed acreage now. So all of a sudden now all of a sudden they're paying $20,000 to $2,000 an acre to your town. And that's where these towns are like, well, we're building a new school. We're doing all like these towns that have these solar projects are like getting a lot more money. So because it's like having a Walmart the size of like 100 acres or 50 acres, it's insane. But what happens is New York State and the utilities go, not exactly. We can't do that. We can't pay you $1 million for this project a year. But what we can do is do a payment in lieu of taxes, and we'll come to the table and we'll negotiate something. How about we take care of your fire department bill? Or how about we take, and it's $150,000. Okay, fine, done. I see that happen all the time. How about we take care of this bill or that bill for you? Or how about we help put money in an escrow account every year to build a new building for your town hall with a bell on the top or whatever. Anything that they can come up with, they'll come up with a thing. And most of the time what they're doing is trying to take and stretch that money out over the life of the project. Unless they're in a coal closure zone, and then all of a sudden New York State's giving them buco bucks, and this is not a coal closure zone, but like Lansing is, right? So all of a sudden they're like, well, we get $1,000 or $2,000 per acre just because we're replacing a coal power plant. Well, all of a sudden the town doesn't know that necessarily unless somebody in their lawyer's office is telling them that. So places in like northern New York, they're like coming up to us as a consultant and they're saying, well, we kind of have like $300,000 to play with here. What do you think we should do with that? So this is where you got to kind of get creative. But a payment in lieu of taxes, I feel if they're messing with the agricultural land, they should be putting some value towards something agriculturally related. And I think it should be into education. And I think it should be into like 4-H, FFA. Let's get these programs back into Caroline. We need these kids. They're our future farmers. We need them to be able to have places to go and funding, so that they can go buy their market pigs and show them and do things that are agriculturally related. The other thing is focusing on environmental stuff, and that's the ecovoltaics. Have them put a few $1,000 or $500 per megawatt towards something. It's an easy ask. These companies, this is like something that they're not going to do if you don't ask for it. But if you ask for it, it's like just a budgeted line item. But it can go a long ways. If we become a town with, say, 100 or 200 acres and you're getting $500 per acre, and that can be allocated towards youth programs around farming, wow. That's a huge boom for these towns. And I'm seeing that, especially in places, in rural parts of the Midwest where like these programs are very strong already and always constantly looking for funding somewhere, so yeah.
Anyone else have any further questions right now? Well, great, thank you. This has been an interesting and rewarding discussion. And
Well, thanks for
may have
having me.
further details available. Yeah, no, that's great. And,
Yeah.
I think part of the issue we're wrestling, of course, is that, until power lines change, there's likely not to be anything nearby, but I'm with you saying that we still want to be ready for when that day comes. So.
Yep,
we'll
for
get
sure.
through this.
And it could be that day comes sooner than later. Somebody buys up some land and wants to build a shop somewhere. Who knows? Could happen, but yeah. I'm crossing my fingers. I want to see power. I want to see power plants around here personally, but I'd put them in my backyard too, because it's a lot of good infrastructure.
Well, I heard the sheep are very cute.
They were very cute.
Yeah. Yeah, he has like a cross between Finn and Icelandic sheep. They're a little shaggy.
Very cute, yes.
All right, great.
All right.
Well, again, thanks for sharing your time.
Well, thank you.
Hey,
Yeah, saying goodbye to Zoom land. All right. Now we will get back to the rest of our agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right. And I forgot to put on approval of the minutes on our agenda, so I'm now inserting that before Michelle's town board report. So, I sent the minutes from last meeting out. There were a few changes that Barb suggested. I incorporated all of those. Is there any other comment on these or any objection to approving the minutes? Okay, so I'm gonna assume that they are done. Great. All right, and yeah, looks like Will is coming
I'm
in.
here.
Okay, you're there? Okay, good. Yeah, you're flickering.
Yeah, there.
There we go. All right, Michelle, what do you have to tell us from the town board end?
I guess the main thing is that, we're interested in having your input on the subdivision law. That's kind of
Okay, well, we'll get to that
Okay.
next.
so that's like a priority. And that you are going to address the town board tomorrow with your recommendations for changing the zoning.
In regards to manufactured
Yeah.
housing parks, yes, indeed.
So that would be the only thing I have to say. It's we're all about the subdivision law right now.
Could I just make a comment, and I don't know, it's either for Bill or Michelle to pass on to Mark. When Mark sent around the suggested changes that the board has come up with for the subdivision law, he sent it to the planning board but left out Brad.
I
and so
already informed
okay.
Mark of that.
All right,
He
okay.
apologizes profusely. He
Okay,
didn't do
good.
it personally. He did it to me.
Good.
Yeah, no, yeah, that.
Just want to make sure Mark knows who all is
He
on the
does.
planning board.
He does, and he feels really bad about it. Just a little bit.
I didn't mean to.
A mental typo.
Okay.
Okay, so I think then we will indeed go on to the subdivision law. We all, after Brad, looked at the subdivision law earlier in the year, and there were some substantial changes that were done to reflect the fact that we had zoning and different requirements because of that, in terms of how lots would or not be. But the big change was more of a philosophical one that was, I think, the fact that all projects essentially were getting reviewed. So previously, a lot of things just got code approval or whatever. So a lot more got reviewed. And some of this is a slight step back for lot line adjustments. In terms of the lot line adjustments, rather than submissions then going to the code enforcement officer, they go to the town clerk. And rather than them being reviewed by the review board, could be approved by the code officer. And there are some limits on, if certain bad things would happen as a result of lot line adjustment, then it would have to go to the review board. And so in terms of that piece, the first couple of things, that's my summary. Any concerns, questions, comments about those changes?
No, I read through it all fine.
Okay, Will, you had something you want to say?
I honestly didn't get what was intended by saying if the action results in an additional lot being created. What was that really a reference to?
So that is in the existing law, and I agree it's puzzling because by definition, a lot line adjustment is typically, I'm taking this little piece of mine and transferring it to yours. It's an adjustment of where the boundary line is. I think it's like you have to obey all laws kind of law. I think it's there as a safety and a catch-all. I agree with you. A lot line adjustment, I don't think, as far as I know, doesn't create an additional lot. Good question.
But if someone's trying to use that, and that's just basically saying you can't use that to create a new
To
lot.
create a new lot.
Yeah. So lot line adjustments don't create new lots. So, okay, good point. So that. All right. Then the third change mentioned was that it says the review board chair or his or her designated proxy shall stamp and sign these things. I don't understand, to me, that's almost exactly what the current law does say. But it talks about plats rather than survey maps, and I'm not fully aware of the difference between a plat and a survey map. But I don't know if Michelle, if you have any more info
No,
on that, but number 3, I don't fully understand what is being changed. But also doesn't seem that bad to me, so. Yeah, to review again, it says in our current law, it says the clerk of the review board signs the plat. Now, that could be one of the changes. We don't have a clerk of the review board, so I think it's probably clarifying the language
Yeah.
to say it's the review board chair, the proxy. So that maybe, again, and the change from survey maps may be simply, it may become plats in the final law. Maybe the survey maps is simply Mark's summary of it. So maybe that's all it is that it's correcting where it used to say clerk of the review board.
No, there is a difference.
Between plat and survey.
A plat or plat map generally
Yeah.
covers a larger area, like a whole neighborhood or a whole subdivision.
Mhm.
A survey is a more detailed map for a single property that establishes its exact boundary lines and may show existing structures and easements and so on. So a plat shows how land is divided. A survey provides a precise depiction of what is actually on a specific parcel of land.
Okay, excellent. That
Doesn't
helps.
the plat also capture if there are additional subdivision limits? You know, that goes back to you had an original piece of land and the plat will identify that it was part of some original piece of land. And if
Okay.
there were restrictions based on previous subdivisions, it's carried along in the plat, isn't it?
Yes, such things I think are plat notes, and you are right. And I guess all I was trying to say, and thank you for the distinction, because I always was wondering. I was saying here, though, I think that maybe the use of the word survey maps was perhaps a colloquial usage by Mark in writing this note to all of us. And maybe really is gonna be plats in just, I'm not sure. And yes, you're right, Will, about that the plat will typically, and that because we said that in terms of the zoning law, that like the number of subdivision opportunities would be a plat note, which is like a legal thing attached to the plat.
Right.
At any rate, with that understanding that it's going to use the right words to define what the degree is being signed on, and that it's the review board or the designated proxy, I'm okay with that. Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to skip to number 5 on my list. I think that because that's the one that says that lot line adjustments are submitted to the town clerk. I think it just happens to appear twice in the law, so they're just changing it again to be careful. So I think that's also okay by me. Any other comments on that going to the town clerk? All right, so.
What was the 5 ever and 5 nothing?
Where are we?
Number 4.
Yeah, but that's what we're getting to now.
Okay.
I skipped that one because it's only,
Okay.
it is the one that I think is more substantive, and I think, the town board acknowledges that. So then all the rest of those things were relatively minor changes. This is now a more significant change. So, to set the background, I think probably all of us know, but just to be sure everyone is aware. Right now, the way the subdivision law is written, if there's a certain number of divisions within a certain time frame, and that is 5 divisions within a 5-year time frame, then the subdivision becomes a major subdivision and different rules apply than if that's not the case. So there's a window in which you look back to see, oh, was that divided 3 years ago? Now you're exceeding what that was. Now you have to abide by this thing. It's always a little uncomfortable because a lot of what a major subdivision does is says, well, you have to look at how you lay out the streets, and then and if you've already divided and built homes 3 years ago, it's a little, it's weird. But I think that the reason they're trying to do is they don't want people to avoid the need to go through that kind of thinking and review simply by saying, oh, I did this, one this year and one this year and one this year, and then, so there's that. So there was a 5-year look back period. The proposal is to not use a 5-year look back period, but to use a forever look back period, saying from the time zoning was passed, you cannot subdivide, make more than 5 subdivisions without being classified a major subdivision. Independent of time frame. So, Michelle, you want to explain to us the board's thinking, recommending eliminating the 5-year look back period?
Well, the thinking is to avoid segmentation, which is what you described basically, where people just do a little bit here, so they can avoid the planning for, roads or whatever, and they can avoid turning it into a major subdivision simply by running out the clock.
Has that historically though been an issue?
I can't speak to that. I'm assuming it has been, but it doesn't matter, right? You're making a law not according to what might be a problem, but what makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem would be like, let's say 100 years from now.
Yeah, or even
If
50 years from now. I mean, I think,
Or 20.
I think, some company or developer is not going to sit around like a hawk for 20 or 30 years just waiting to avoid the major subdivision. They're going to want to get it done, get their money.
Well, they might want to wait for 6 years.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I feel skeptical about that.
And I think the reason why we said the 5 years, because I mean, one's if like a farmer with 100 acres wanted to give his children land,
Right.
and after 20 years, it finally got chopped up, 5 to 10 acres at a time, and this way would say, hey, we're looking back 20 years, and now that's a major subdivision.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Barb, Will?
But it doesn't prevent it from occurring. It just has some other steps that they have to do because it's a major and not a minor subdivision.
Right.
So,
Right,
So-
if someone owns a piece of property, they sold it, someone else comes in and divides it once.
Mhm.
But because that land was divided 20 years ago, 3 times or 4 times, now you hit the magic number 20, and that one individual. I mean, I think, I don't know, I think that's just an undue burden.
so would you suggest a different amount of time instead of a 5-year look back? It's more reasonable to do a 10-year or 20-year look back?
I mean,
With generation maybe.
I would not do more than 10 years. I think 5 years is probably reasonable to avoid developers purposely being sneaky.
What about individuals being purposefully sneaky?
Any individual business, a
Not that that ever happens. I'm not saying that would ever happen, but I'm just, theoretically.
Yeah, I think it places then undue burdens on the person who's wanting to do the subdivision of that property. And I think it also plays an undue burden on the town to look back 50 years through papers for, well, when was that last divided? I mean, who knows how records are going to be, how good they're going to be kept.
And forever just seems like
Well, from now on at the future.
yeah, from now on,
But
but
still-
from now on, it just seems like it's
At some point, the law will be disbanded. Okay, Will, go ahead, and then I'm gonna chime in.
Yeah, the part of the problem is that if you're the person doing the first subdivision, you're the one who takes all the burden for what may never happen, ever. So you can assume that maybe in some small percentage or some percentage of the cases, you'll end up getting to 5 subdivisions, but you don't know what that percentage is going to be or
Oh,
when
so
you're
the-
going to hit it.
I mean,
Or
would it be helpful if we changed language so that it was more than 5 divisions by the same owner?
Think about that.
And
Will, just to clarify, so what the board is saying is not, I mean, until you hit that number 5, there's no burden. So the first person to subdivide, if they only divide into 3 pieces, has no extra burden on them, just so we're clear on that point. But it is indeed, and I'm actually very much with you that I have a significant issue with this because again, 20 years down the road, so you take a 100-acre property, divide it into 4 pieces. because that's what, fine, we want to avoid that major subdivision. 20 years later, the person, there's 4 different families own the property, and one of them wants to sell 5 acres to their kid. And now it's gonna be treated as a major subdivision. I think it doesn't make sense. Not that it's even necessarily a huge burden, but it doesn't make sense at that point, go back and try to look at the layout of all the lots. It
Right.
just, but to your other point, already the town, the review board and the town clerk have to keep track of land divisions now in the town.
Yeah.
Because the zoning law sets a density limit in the rural areas, and the only way that's being enforced is that each property got a number of subdivision possibilities in terms of take its acres, divide by 3, that's your possibility. So they have to keep track of that number already. So this doesn't add accounting burden, because already every time a split is happening, the review board theoretically is looking at that number. At least they are in the
Right.
rural areas, not in the towns. But
Well,
Yeah,
so does it make a difference if the person who wants to subdivide down the line is a relative of the original owner, or they're just somebody who bought that land because it looked nice, like?
but I wouldn't say it has to be related. Now, the question about is it the same owner is an interesting question.
Because I mean, if your intention is to avoid sneaky behavior, conniving and manipulative behavior.
Let me be clear here. Let's just step back for a second. We want to prevent segmentation, okay?
And the
So
question is whether the
Right.
5-year look back is adequate for that, or whether you need to go with forever.
Right, that's the question here,
Okay,
all right?
So could I just ask a clarifying question, how this would work? So let's say, today I divide something into, I've got 1,000 acres and I divide it into 4 pieces. And so 6 years from now, I want to do another lot. So then that triggers the major subdivision requirement. But then 20 years after that, I want to add a 6th one. That 6th one also triggers a major subdivision. And then 10 years later, I want to add a 7th one. And that's still a major. So each time after number 5, each time I file to do something, it's treated as a major subdivision. Am I understanding that correctly?
That would be my assumption, but I haven't, really studied it, so. But that would be my assumption, yeah.
but it would still be subject to the number of total divisions the original land could be divided into, right?
In the ag rural district, I mean, again, this applies also though to in town, it happened to be a 5-acre lot in town that was divided up into 10 half-acre lots. I mean, that would actually be a very typical subdivision, right? That would be your standard suburban subdivision.
But it would still have to meet all the other requirements for each individual plot.
Yeah, it would have to be able to meet
Septic and
setback requirements, which are very minimal, and be able to provide water, potable water, and all that sort of stuff.
Even without major subdivision review, you still have to abide by all the rules of how many lots can be on that
Yeah, I mean,
piece of land, right?
yeah, I think the intent behind major subdivision review is, again, to try to look at the project as a whole, to think about how, again, if you read it, it talks a lot about streets and traffic flow and, the impact on utilities. And, again, it's more typically if you're putting in a suburban development sort of thing, why to me, it's a little bit of a bad fit to use a infinite, from now on, look back.
Yeah, I think the 5-year is probably the more appropriate because
I mean, when we looked at this, it seemed like a lot of other towns did the 5-year. Isn't that what we?
I don't recall. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't recall.
I will say Mark says that the town of Dryden has the infinite period of time. That this is what Dryden does.
How long have they had it? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, so let's do this. Currently, it's 5 years. There's a proposal to say, basically from now on, Is there any other number the planning board would wish to suggest to the town board to avoid, undue segmentation of a project that really is a single project, as opposed to what we're envisioning, which is if it's 20 years apart, it's not really one project. So is there a different time frame besides 5 years that we would recommend, or not? Or is 5 years the right number, or is it 3 years? It used to be, I think, 3 years.
I think the question was also, Mark was wondering why you picked 5 years, why you would, pick 5 years as the time.
Well, again, we didn't. This was language that came from Nan, I think, and developed by Nan and Mark. So
I guess another way to put that is, why would you support that?
no. And that is a good question. Is why, whatever number we might recommend, why would we say that number? And I'm even saying all of us are agreed that it shouldn't be from now on to the future, but I'm hearing a lot of skepticism on the part of the planning board. So I think Barb felt less upset about the change, if I'm reading the room right.
I'm just trying to understand
I just
the
don't-
implications.
I just don't think it hits that intention. If your intention is to prevent division, does it really prevent division though? Because you can still.
No, they're not trying to prevent division. They're trying to
Yes.
prevent a significant amount of division without review of the project as a whole.
Sure.
So, because you're still allowed to divide,
Sure.
going through major subdivisions here doesn't mean you can't divide the property that way.
Sure.
They might just say, well, maybe you actually need to adjust the boundaries a little bit this way or something. I have to look at the section again to see what.
But yeah, I had a hard time separating out the real concerns behind subdivision laws from the need to plan for sewers and roads, and some of the utility features we don't yet have in our town. Like if we had a sewer system going, my outlook would be a little bit different than a septic. But then there are septic concerns too, but then there's the health department.
Yeah, I mean, that's never under control of the town, right? The septic is that if it meets Tompkins County Division of Environmental Health standards acceptance, then you can build it.
Right, but that's what we have right now instead of having a sewer system. And if we had a sewer system, usually that's a town.
I think a more pressing issue, I think, would be the roads. But also,
Okay.
I think it's just mainly that people can use this segmentation as a way to avoid going through the major subdivision process. And so this is to prevent that.
Right, but I think a valid question is, what is it that they're trying to avoid that's so scary that they actually might do it? And again, I will look again at the major subdivision section. I did not do that for this meeting, and that's a big miss, because I can't, other than, I know they talked about road layout and traffic egress and ingress and things like that.
So that's
Oh,
Which is important if
we
you're
made-
doing 5, 6, or 7 lots at one time, but seems a lot less important if over the span of 6 years, you're adding a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot. But you can't extend a public road anyway without triggering a subdivision review. Right, that's one of the, it only, if you're extending a road, you're a subdivision that gets reviewed. End of story. That's how the law is written. So I'm not sure what it is that someone is actually trying to avoid that the town board is so concerned about.
They're definitely thinking someone is on the long game.
Yeah, right, and that's what I just feel like, that we're creating a probable burden for people who are not being mischievous, I guess,
Yeah.
on the off chance of preventing something that will likely never happen.
But for the forever, that doesn't necessarily mean it would trigger it, does it? Because someone could decide that it didn't.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, let's say 20 years down the road, a 5th one came about, and they're like, oh, now that's a major, but the town board at the time, or review board at the time is like, no, that's just
Well, they could have rescinded the law or changed the law by that time.
Yeah,
if that's what
you
you mean.
have
I don't think they can ignore it.
They can't even.
I think if the law's on the books and it triggers the review, the reviewer is supposed to look at, the reviewer might give it a very cursory review.
Yeah, I
They
don't
think
they
this
can
is silly.
waive- Yeah, I don't think they can waive the review.
And that's
right?
what I meant, it's like, once it's there and you have to
Right.
be triggered for something, and it's like, really?
I could see this being abused more than an undue burden on someone rather than preventing
I mean,
what they're trying to prevent.
my experience, at least with developers, and I have a couple of my family, they don't mess around, they just go and you have a
Get done.
plan, you get financing for the development and the subdivisions, and they do the paperwork necessary. I mean, I think this is gonna target the rural farmer, as you say, or someone who's exchanged hands. They have 100 acres and now it's in 5 plots 20 years down the road. I think that's getting a little carried away, and
But maybe this is another question for Nan to see.
Yeah, I don't know, I think this came about in part because Mark noticed that Dryden did it differently. I'm not fully sure, I haven't had a direct conversation with Mark about it. I'll probably bring it up tomorrow night, I'll see if you guys want to talk about it tomorrow night, Michelle, I can communicate kind of what I'm hearing from the planning board and then get it directly from you guys. Not to put you on the spot too much, but let everyone take the heat.
No, that's fine with me because I think the way it's written in the agenda is just that the, planning board has a report, sort of. Nothing about what you're gonna talk about, so.
I'm also just reading here on the New York State Department of Health site, and they've gone into detail on this. But they do talk that Department of Health for subdivisions can issue a 5-year approval and does issue a 5-year approval expiration for conditions of approval of subdivisions regarding Department of Health approvals. And so if a developer doesn't make it within that 5-year time frame, then it kind of restarts the clock and they have to reapply for Department of Health permission. So that may relate to the 5-year look back period. I mean, that would be a good
Yeah,
question.
that
for
may
Nan.
inform Nan's decision.
Why is the 5-year look back period?
Well, I think our property is actually one you could think about a little bit. The Arsenals owned it. They had a creamery, then they had other businesses. And I don't know what the original limits were, but by 2000, well, so they stopped farming in 68. In 68. In 2008, by 2008, the properties were divided into what we bought, what Mary Arsenal had, what was across the road where the pond is, and what happens to be in Danby where George is. And then there's another plot that's his daughter Amy. And then a couple years ago, Levante carved out a piece because he really wanted to live closer to his grandfather and take care of his grandfather, but it's not allowed by the zoning. So he's living next to his mom, but he can walk across the field to his grandfather. So now there's what was, I believe, one piece of land. Now it's in 1, 2, 3, 4. Bill, you're a 5 on that.
So Mary
and
Arsenal's property got
6,
subdivided
7,
into 4
8.
pieces. One
Now
of which we bought.
it's 8, yeah. I think now it's 8.
And Will, I would not consider that. I mean, for one thing, there were no public roads because all of it was abutting regular roads, but it's not a major subdivision in the sense that we think of needing to examine utilities or anything else. Because it was spread out over a bunch
Yeah.
of years from start to finish, so.
But would this trigger it now?
Well,
Yeah.
if it goes to the
Right.
no look back period, then it would
That's-
have at some
My
point.
point is like.
It actually would have been when Mary Oswald tried to subdivide that into
Sure.
5 acre lots, that's what would have triggered it.
I think the look back period is to when zoning was instituted.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. when
We're
zoning-
thinking 30 years from now.
Right, yeah, I'm saying that if this had happened, yeah, right, in the past.
So I think that's one of the kind of examples you might consider. And honestly, we're considering subdividing it, but I'm not, everything's a thought at this point.
Well, yeah, and this change, I say, would not affect any of us in general.
No,
like-
I realize that, but I'm just saying, whatever is decided, of course we go along with. But the question is, it started out as the Arsenals. The Arsenals still own pieces of that property, and they're still subdividing, and the rest of us are benefiting from it.
Yeah, well, I think the question would be, would there have been a step in that process where it would have been beneficial to have had that gone through some kind of review? I'm
Right.
grasping for, I don't have an answer to that question. I don't think that it would have, but
Because
that's,
because it wasn't originally a planned subdivision. It was just
Right.
over time, over many,
Right.
many years, divided.
Mhm.
I think that's what we're looking to avoid is a over the years division instead of a subdivision. I guess it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there, again, when you read the review type things, it reads like, a developer's coming in and putting in, in 1 year, a bunch of houses. I mean, and I understand why that gets reviewed.
Yes.
A large rural property being divided up bit by bit over 10 years, I don't.
I mean, it's still being reviewed, just not as a large.
Right, it has a different,
Right, it's still being reviewed. And that's the other thing, like, if there was a concern, it might still come up during review. Especially you're doing a 5-year look back, like, hey, we just need to, be aware that these are some potential issues. Cause even if you don't trigger the major subdivision review, the land can only be divided so many times based off of whatever formula, so. So, whether you're going through the major subdivision review or just the regular review, the land can be divided up to that many times.
Okay, all right, I'll bring some of those thoughts to the town board tomorrow. If anyone has the desire to look at the subdivision stuff and change any of their thoughts, between now and then, just email me a note. And I will communicate all of that. I'm gonna suggest that we end the meeting, rather than delve into more of the solar stuff. I think we had, it's
I
worth
just
thinking about that.
Yeah. want to put a footnote to that just to clarify, because I don't want somebody to be saying conflict of interest. Some of those parcels I'm describing to you are not in our town, so my subdivision wouldn't necessarily
Well,
have
and even
a
if this,
consequence.
right, but even if this got passed now, it wouldn't impact your ability to subdivide your property unless you're going to go into 6 pieces, right? Then you have to go, but if you're dividing,
I'm not that
if you're making
ambitious.
2 or 3 pieces, because it's only from when zoning got started, so.
Right.
There's no conflict of interest for you, don't worry.
Yeah, but no, it's being recorded, and people might not realize we're talking about something that's still hypothetical in a sense.
Well, Bill
But-
just said for the record that it doesn't affect you, so.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but-
Even if it is passed and becomes law, it
Yeah.
means you could subdivide your property into 4 pieces without.
Yeah, I don't
going
have
through
a
the decision here.
I don't have a concern about what I can or cannot do. I just don't want someone listening to our discussion to take it the wrong way and not realize it's not
Right.
going to apply to what I just described. That's all.
Okay, got it. All right. Our next meeting we currently have scheduled for Tuesday, October 21st. Is that still a good date for everybody?
October?
October 21st.
First.
That's a Monday.
Okay, then I have the date wrong. Is it?
21st?
No.
Oh, good.
Tuesday.
Thank goodness.
21st is a Tuesday.
Yeah,
As long as we're in 2025.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
for AM.
Yeah.
I should probably.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I printed out a calendar and it's one of those silly Monday to Sundays.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right. As far as November goes, and I made the grave error of forgetting my cell phone, so I don't have my calendar with me, but I think I was fairly open in what would be roughly the month from that, but which must be something like.
So
about the
Tuesday
18th.
would be the 18th.
Yeah, so how does Tuesday, November 18th look for people?
Better than the 25th.
Well, that's what you're hearing. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's not the first day though, right?
No, but
it is in deer season.
the week of Thanksgiving is.
Yeah.
Is
Always.
Yeah.
November 18th is
Yes.
a Tuesday.
Yes.
That looks fine for me.
Okay, Will, Michelle?
Yep, seems fine.
You
I
can-
mean, who knows what's gonna happen between now and then, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Right now,
Sounds
it's
good.
open. So,
All right, yeah, well, we'll check in again, in the October meeting. But that's what we'll target is that I can't do sooner than that because I won't be in the country, but I can do.
It's
and
Madagascar, right?
As Madagascar, and later than that is way too close to Thanksgiving, so.
Yeah.
It's probably that week or nothing, and you know, if it turns out to be nothing, it's nothing. What I think I will probably do for our next meeting, so, you know, on this question of the solar siting law, I mean, exactly for some of the reasons that Caleb said, that, you know, it's fairly unlikely. I mean, a big project in this town just aren't very likely because of the 3-phase power situation.
Right.
I want to do a good job in this, but I don't want to like beat ourselves to a pulp
Right.
trying to figure all this out because, you know, who
No
knows?
rush.
So let's get something decent on the books. And so I'd like to wrap it up this calendar year, in about a couple meetings.
Do you still want me? I had reached out to Erica
Right.
and we were trying to coordinate, you know, getting the ag committee together to comment on this, but we couldn't get everybody to gather this
Okay.
week. Are there still questions that we have for the ag committee specifically?
I guess, well, so it's still a good thing, but part of what we were after is we want to make, I mean, this was generated in part by a request from the Ag Committee, which was to, and I don't know the exact wording, but sort of revise the solar law, I think, to encourage agrivoltaic stuff. And I guess the question is, you know, what does that sort of mean for the ag community?
Yeah, why?
Why?
What are the outcomes that the Ag Committee is looking for
Mhm.
by encouraging agrivoltaics? And do you want
Yeah.
money? Do you want an
Yeah,
opportunity to have more land? I mean, what is it?
so make sure that whatever we do is meeting
Yeah.
their request as opposed to what we imagine it ought to happen.
Sure.
So if that can happen, that would be great.
Sure.
So what I think I'll probably do is reach out to Guillermo Metz and see if he can come to the October meeting. That will, and then any information we have from the Ag Committee, and then we'll see if we can come up with a plan for how to actually decide some things and write some things down in November and December.
Are we going to want to consider if we do go farther on agrivoltaics, the relationship of whether current law allows CAFOs to locate onto an agrivoltaic site? I probably am not saying that very well.
Well, no, I said, I mean, you know, because that was what Kay was talking about, you know, that would be the one detrimental ag thing. I mean, CAFOs, we couldn't completely eliminate in Caroline, because of there's certain ag things where you can't do that, but they
Right, but-
are.
Jeff
So-
Kehoe might
Yeah.
be
But
able.
they are somewhat limited in the zoning law, and we should probably take a look at
Okay.
that. So that's homework for next meeting, is to at least review what's in the zoning law about CAFOs and the citing of solar stuff. Whether it'll be at all allowed, given the current set of where things are allowed and other things. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Will, if you have any way, if you want to ask Jeff or somebody else, would a CAFO ever be allowed on a solar site? That would be reasonable to ask someone in ag markets.
Yeah, I think Jeff would just answer that question directly with
Okay,
no
why
problem.
don't you email that question to him?
Okay, does everyone want to be CC'd on it?
One
Or
of
you-
those.
We just get back to you.
Confined animal feeding operation. Why don't you, well, it's up to you, Will. I think you can just do it and then send me, any response, and I'll pass out to the planning board.
Okay. Will do.
Okay, I think then the meeting is adjourned.
Great.
Thank you all very much.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Have a good month. Happy Halloween.